The Whitmore house stood at the edge of town, where the road gave way to gravel and trees leaned close like silent witnesses. Daniel had never seen it in person, only in faded photographs where it seemed to lurk rather than stand. After his great-aunt Eleanor's death, it became the last Whitmore left. The will was unsettlingly brief. Asterisk, the Whitmore estate shall belong to Daniel Whitmore, who must keep its memory. Asterisk. He arrived on a gray October afternoon. The taxi driver left him at the gates, muttering, "Best be gone before nightfall," before speeding away. The house loomed, windows dark, attic window glaring like an unblinking eye. Inside, the air was stale. Dust and silence clung to every surface. The portraits of long-dead relatives seemed to follow him, none more than Eleanor Whitmore herself, painted in black lace, her faint smile both welcoming and warning. By nightfall, Daniel settled into a second-floor room. He had just begun to drift to sleep when he heard it, a whisper. Faint, uncertain, but real. Not the wind, not the creak of wood. It came again. From above. From the attic. Sleep came fitfully. The old house groaned and shifted with the wind, but beneath those ordinary noises, Daniel kept hearing something else, soft, deliberate sounds above his ceiling. Whispers, as though someone were speaking in the attic, too low for him to make out. At 3 a.m, a sudden creak startled him awake. He held his breath, straining to listen. The sound of footsteps traveled across the attic floor, slow and uneven, like someone pacing. Then silence. He forced himself to laugh, blaming the house's age, though his skin prickled with unease. In the dim lamplight, shadows gathered in the corners, stretching like dark fingers across the walls. By morning, the fear felt foolish. He brewed coffee on the rusted stove and convinced himself he'd imagined it all. But as he climbed the staircase to the second floor, he glanced up. The attic door loomed at the end of the narrow hall, closed but somehow watching him. The memory of whispers returned, curling in his mind like smoke. He turned away quickly, yet couldn't shake the thought. Someone or something had been walking above him while he slept. Daniel decided he needed answers. The unease of the night clung to him, and the silence of the house felt too heavy. That morning, he walked into town, hoping conversation and daylight would clear his head. At a small diner, he ordered coffee and mentioned he was staying at the Whitmore estate. The room went quiet. Forks stopped clinking against plates. The waitress gave him a strained smile, but an older man at the counter turned sharply. "You're staying there?" the man asked, voice low. His eyes were pale and troubled. "Best you don't." Daniel forced a smile. "It's just an old house." The man shook his head. "Old houses don't whisper, son. Not unless they're keeping something." Uneasy laughter rippled through the diner, but no one contradicted him. The waitress leaned in and whispered, "Don't go up there after dark. The attic keeps its own." The words lodged in Daniel's mind as he left. By the time he reached the edge of town, he felt more watched than ever. The attic wasn't just a part of the house. It was the reason everyone else stayed away. The morning sun filtered weakly through the dust-streaked windows as Daniel climbed the narrow staircase to the attic. Each step groaned beneath his weight, and with every creak, he felt the air grow colder, heavier. The attic door resisted at first, as though something pressed against it from the other side. When it finally swung open, the smell of mildew and age poured out. Inside, the space was cluttered with forgotten trunks, broken chairs, and stacks of yellowed newspapers. But one trunk stood apart. Large, iron-banded, scarred by deep scratches along the floorboards as if it had been dragged, violently, across the room. Daniel knelt beside it, running his hand over the cold metal lock. Stranger still were the markings on the walls, faint words scrawled in a shaky hand. He leaned closer, squinting at the faded letters. Asterisk, don't listen. Don't believe. Asterisk. A sudden draft stirred the room, and for a moment he thought he heard a sigh. Close, intimate, as if someone were leaning just behind his ear. He spun around. Nothing. Only shadows shifting among the clutter. Daniel backed away from the trunk, unsettled. Whatever lay inside, The house clearly did not want it opened. That night, Daniel tried to convince himself the attic was nothing more than wood and dust, but sleep refused him. The house shifted around him, every groan echoing louder than it should. At last, near midnight, he heard it again, the creak of footsteps. They came from directly above his room. Slow, measured, back and forth across the attic floor. Heart pounding, Daniel lit the lamp and stared at the ceiling. The sound stopped. Then, faintly, a shadow drifted beneath the crack of the attic door at the end of the hall. He froze, lamp trembling in his hand. No one was up there. He'd checked every corner earlier. And yet, that shadow moved. The whisper followed, closer this time. A voice, soft but unmistakable, shaping his name. Daniel. His skin went cold. He stumbled back into his room and slammed the door, but the voice lingered in the silence, curling through the walls like smoke. Long after the whispers faded, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, certain of one thing. Whatever was in the attic knew him, and it was waiting. By morning, Daniel's nerves were frayed. He needed answers, something tangible to make sense of the night. Searching the library, he found a hidden drawer in the desk, stiff with age. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, its cover cracked, its pages yellowed. The name etched inside stopped him cold. Daniel Whitmore. He read through her tight, hurried script. Most entries were mundane, weather notes, visitors, house repairs. But halfway through, the tone shifted. Eleanor wrote of voices above and the restless one who will not sleep. One passage chilled him. Asterisk, the child is restless again. We cannot let her roam. She must stay where she belongs, no matter the cost. If she is freed, the house will never rest, and neither will we. Asterisk. Daniel's pulse quickened. The whispers, the pacing footsteps. Eleanor had heard them too. At the end of the journal, a line stood alone, underlined 3 times. Asterisk. The attic is not to be opened after midnight. Asterisk. Daniel closed the book slowly, his hands shaking. Whatever haunted the house had been there for generations, and his family had known it well. The trunk in the attic had haunted Daniel's thoughts since he'd first seen it. That evening, unable to resist, he carried a crowbar upstairs. The lock was old and stubborn, but after several hard strikes, it cracked open with a sharp snap. Inside lay a single object, a porcelain doll, dressed in tattered lace, its face cracked from age. Its glassy eyes stared upward, a faint smile painted across its lips. Daniel lifted it carefully, unsettled by its weight. Beneath the doll lay scraps of fabric, children's clothes, yellowed with time. As he set the doll on a nearby table, the air shifted. The whispers rose, clearer now, threading together into what almost sounded like laughter. That night, Daniel dreamed of a little girl standing in the attic, her face pale and blurred, her small hand clutching the doll. She looked at him, lips moving in silence, before her whisper cut through the dream. Asterisk, help me. Asterisk. Daniel jolted awake, drenched in sweat. The doll was no longer on the table where he'd left it. It now sat at the foot of his bed, its glass eyes fixed on him. Sleep became dangerous. Every time Daniel closed his eyes, the girl appeared, standing in the attic shadows, clutching the porcelain doll. Her whispers grew sharper, forming words he could no longer ignore. Asterisk, free me, don't let them keep me here. Asterisk. Each night the dream went further. He saw flashes of his great-grandmother, stern and cold, locking the trunk with trembling hands. He heard crying, muffled by the floorboards, and the sound of nails scratching wood. By the 3rd night, the dreams no longer ended when he woke. He stumbled through the house at dawn, only to catch glimpses of her reflection in dusty mirrors, her figure flickering in corners just beyond sight. The doll moved too, never staying where he left it, sometimes perched on a chair, sometimes propped against the door as though it had been watching him sleep. Exhausted, Daniel pressed his palms to his face. The attic's secret was bleeding into him, pulling him closer. He knew it now. Whatever haunted the house had chosen him, and it would not let go until he obeyed. By the fourth night, Daniel no longer wondered if the house was haunted. He knew. The whispers never stopped now, layered voices, some pleading, others mocking, all slithering through the walls. Doors slammed on their own. Lamps flickered until they burst. At times, the floor shuddered as though something massive moved above him, pacing, circling, waiting. The doll appeared everywhere. Once on the stairs, its porcelain face tilted toward him. Another time, in the kitchen chair, hands folded primly in its lap. Worst of all, one morning he found it tucked beneath his quilt, as though it had slept beside him. The journal's warnings replayed in his mind, but the entries no longer felt like history. They felt like prophecy. He wasn't just reading about Eleanor's torment. He was living it. That night, as the wind howled outside, the voices rose together in a single, guttural cry. Asterisk, free us. Asterisk, the sound rattled the windows, shook the walls. Daniel stumbled back, heart hammering. It wasn't one spirit. It was many. And the attic wasn't holding them, it was containing them. Desperate, Daniel returned to the journal, searching for anything he'd missed. Toward the back, tucked between brittle pages, he found loose sheets written in a different, shakier hand. These were not records but confessions. It began with the sickness. The writing read, asterisk, children taken before their time. We could not bury them, for they would not stay buried. Their cries followed us, their shadows lingered. The attic was chosen sealed by blood, bound by name. Only Whitmore hands could keep them quiet. Asterisk. Daniel's chest tightened. His family hadn't just lived with ghosts, they had imprisoned them. Each generation carried the burden of keeping the attic locked, ensuring the spirits never roamed free. The whispers surged as he read, almost as if they knew their secret had been uncovered. Daniel, they hissed. Asterisk, you are one of us. You must choose. Asterisk. The air grew frigid. Shadows crawled along the walls, converging on the attic door. For the first time, Daniel understood. The house wasn't cursed. His bloodline was. And now, the attic wanted him to take his place in the cycle. Midnight came heavy and suffocating. Daniel stood at the bottom of the narrow stairs, journal clutched in one hand, a lantern in the other. The attic door loomed above, whispering with every draft, pulsing as if alive. With each step, the voices grew clearer. Children's cries, Eleanor's harsh commands, laughter that belonged to no living throat. By the time he reached the landing, the lantern's flames sputtered, nearly extinguished. The door creaked open on its own. Inside, the shadows writhed like smoke, curling toward him. In the center stood the doll, perfectly upright, glass eyes reflecting the lantern's weak light. The whispers rose together. Asterisk, free us or stay with us. Asterisk. Daniel's breath came ragged. He thought of Eleanor, of the burden she carried. To open the trunk fully, to release what lingered, might end the curse, or bind him forever. The floor trembled. The shadows pressed closer, brushing his skin with icy fingers. With shaking hands, he stepped forward, whispering, "What do you want from me?" The answer came as a chorus, thunderous and soft all at once. Asterisk, everything. Asterisk. Weeks later, the Whitmore house stood silent again. Dust gathered on the gates, ivy crept further up the brick, and no one in town dared to approach. The sheriff eventually visited after neighbors reported the house's windows glowing at odd hours, but inside he found only emptiness. Daniel's suitcase sat unpacked at the foot of the bed, his wallet still on the dresser. But of Daniel himself, there was no trace. Only the attic seemed different. The trunk lay open, its lock shattered. In the center of the room, the porcelain doll sat upright, its faint smile sharper than before. Anyone who lingered swore they heard whispers drifting down the stairs, children's voices, joined by something new. A man's voice. Daniel's voice. In the weeks that followed, the house returned to its old rhythm of silence, broken only by the restless creak of the attic floorboards at night. The Whitmore legacy had claimed another heir, and the whispers would remain, waiting for the next.